Over the last 2 years, as we all battled the COVID-19 pandemic, one thing that certainly saved us all from the wrath of the pandemic were undoubtedly the vaccines. The largest manufacturer of vaccines in the world, in terms of the number of doses produced, is very much based out of Pune and is helping save millions of lives across the globe. And as much of you have already guessed, I'm talking about the Serum Institute of India. When we talk about Mr. Adar Poonawalla, the CEO of Serum Institute of India, it's understandable that we mostly think of vaccines and saving lives. Now that's very true, but then there is another interesting dimension to the body of work that Mr. Adar Poonawalla focuses on and his ongoing contributions to a cleaner and greener India in more than one way. So without much ado, may I now invite on stage Mr. Adar Poonawalla, Chief Executive Officer of Serum Institute of India, and Mr. Prashant Girbane, Director General MCCIA, to conduct the Fireside chat.
First of all, thank you so much, Adar, for agreeing to do this. I should start with an interesting fact. Very much in Pune city, in this property we all are here. On this stage, just a month ago, we had another Mr. Poonawalla, Dr. Cyrus Poonawalla, and MCCIA, when it organized Pune International Business Summit, felt very, very proud to felicitate Dr. Cyrus Poonawalla on behalf of entire Pune city. All of us gathered, so much so that the 15-odd council generals who had gathered, impromptu they wanted to come on stage because they equally wanted to join the celebration. They said it's not just Pune, it's about all of our countries as well. So it's wonderful. So that's the love and affection for the Poonawalla group in Pune. As we go through the conversation you'd hear, of course it's about saving the lives in Pune, in Maharashtra, in India, and more than 100 countries that it saved millions of lives. Before we turn to the conversation of alternate fuel conclave, maybe if you could start with a question, Adar, because that's in the mind of everyone, right? About the pandemic, and where do you think we're going from here? Because we're sitting with you, that's a natural question, if you could start with that, and then we could go to the alternate fuel.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you. I thought everyone would be fed up by now listening to me about vaccines, but it seems you want to know a little bit more about what's happening, so I'll explain. You know, going forward, as you can tell, the vaccines that this nation chose to use in their program have turned out to be very good. If you look at Europe, US, Hong Kong, other places which have used other approaches and technologies, including the excellent job that the Maharashtra government, central government, everybody has done to get us out of this and recover the country faster than most other countries. You know, so given that situation today, as you can see, cases hardly being there and hospitalizations hardly going up, I think we are on a very good recovery wicket, and subject to some new mutant variant strain not coming about, if we all take our boosters and if the central government permits the permission of use of boosters, which I hope happens very soon, then we can travel and get back to, you know, our normal lives, you know, pre-pandemic. So I think we're in a very good situation now.
Thank you. I think something like this, possibly I would have shared with you all also, but now that you heard from the person who has the possibly biggest possible credibility to talk about this topic, I can tell you that I said so as well. That's just on a lighter note. I think, but great to hear the positive note, and great to hear that we would have brighter days ahead. While we talk at this conclave about alternate fuels, while we talk about new mobility, of course, it's a very, very important subset of the clean and green energy. It's a very, very important subset of a better environment. When we talk about a better environment, very few groups can be counted right at the top that have made significant contribution. One of the best national contribution in looking after the environment of a city has been a city initiative, a clean city initiative, and that was here in Pune. It was Adar Poonawalla Clean City Initiative. It was so big that many, many other states, other cities, and some other countries came, visited, looked at some of the best practices. Of course, we have areas of improvement, but looked at best practices and progress. Other, that was a significant contribution, and we all were very, very pleased to see this and very, very glad and a lot of gratitude for what has happened over the last few years. But what was the motivation behind it? Where does it stand today? And how is it progressing? And then we'll come to some of the other clean fuel ones.
So, in 2015, I felt it was time to do something and act because the government, whether it's, central government, state governments, need support also from the private sector. And we were in a fortunate position to be able to contribute and do this. And there are a lot of other socially conscious groups who do a lot of good work. Sanjeev and the Bajaj group has done a lot of philanthropy for the city and the nation also. But this particular area was something where I felt that, even when foreign visitors come to our city or people living in certain areas have to deal with the garbage problem, where we just have so much population, such a high population that, we need help. So now we've got 450 trucks and machines going across the city. From the electric vehicles, in fact, part of them, about 150 of them are electric. So you'll be pleased to know around 50 tons of CO2 emissions are prevented because out of the 400, around 150 or so
About
are
when
electric.
did that switch happen? Very recently, I would imagine.
No, I think over the last 2-3 years.
Wow, nice.
When we found electric vehicles, and that's one of the things that all of you have to figure out to increase the range and reliability of the,
There are many
output.
manufacturers sitting here,
Yes.
so it's great to hear from you as a user.
As that happens, you'll see a lot of switchover, which is obvious, even from the automotive sector.
True.
And now what is happening is that this is going to the landfills, which is still a problem. That needs to be processed. We're trying to process what we can. We've got a separate initiative also to process the wet waste. So thousands of tons through that organization, Noble Exchange, collects wet waste. And 100 tons a day is being processed in Talegaon, where instead of that wet waste, creating methane, which goes into the atmosphere and can never be captured back like carbon capture or whatever, is then used in digesters to convert to CNG,
Awesome.
and we're providing that to the CNG buses that are being used also at the moment. So it's become a good biogas and garbage waste solution,
True.
all in one,
True.
which we are hoping we can scale up, but again, we need some support from government policies in that, and then we can scale that up.
Awesome. So what started, when we walk around or drive through the city of Pune, we always see those bins around. And some of those we wanted to see if we traveled rest of the world. We also wanted to have those. But I think somebody had to put a step forward, and that's what APCC did. And we have lots of those in Pune. But it's wonderful to see, while it started with the waste picking, the roads, it moved on to the cleaner energy and the CNG through your investment. The next one that I'll move on to is, you have made various, we are supporting various ventures in domain of clean energy and green mobility, right? It's interesting, when we think about Mr. Poonawalla, it's natural to think about the Serum Institute, because that's what we all are proud of in India. Why and how did you get in? We are very glad that you got into it, you're supporting it. But how did this journey begin supporting the ventures in clean mobility area?
So, health and the environment goes hand in hand, and these are two equally passionate areas. Of course, you can consider us leaders in the health space, but we want to contribute to the green hydrogen story of India, which is also something that is complementary and has to be complementary to the batteries and the electric space. Because, to improve range and to improve the usage, the storage, all that, that's where I think hydrogen plays a role. And thanks to Mr. Aditya Thackeray, also motivating us to be more conscious in this area and making investments We have already sort of tackled the technology part. Siddharth Jain, my partner, who is running H2E, and Hexis, we are making electrolyzers and fuel cells. So you have the technology now to convert solar energy or wind energy into hydrogen through electrolyzers. And then at the area, and this is what we were discussing, wherever the major power consumption is there, steel plants, other plants, maybe some government PSUs, we put the fuel cells to convert the hydrogen back to electricity. The challenge, of course, is doing it on scale and bringing the cost down to make it viable. I think that's the challenge everywhere. And the batteries will also play a very important role in mobility, because if we are looking at extending the range, giving all that the vehicles need, you need to be able to recharge fast or refuel quickly. That's where CNG or hydrogen plays a role. So we have to figure out, in our country, how to transport that hydrogen cost effectively, how to blend it with CNG, how to use it in our vehicles, and we have to find ways of encouraging and incentivizing manufacturers of vehicles to have the technology to incorporate CNG, otherwise all this is for nothing. So matching the demand with the supply and making it cost effective, I think, is the challenge which everyone's trying to figure out over the next 5 years. And you've got other much larger groups like the Ambani and Adani groups also looking to make a major headway in that. So we look forward to their contribution also.
Oh, thank you so much. I think, isn't it very encouraging when we talk about startups? We are one of the 3 largest startup nations in the whole world. We usually hear about e-commerce startups, and that's wonderful, that's good. But when you hear about such a large group putting its weight behind startups that are focused on clean energy, startups that are focused on alternate fuel, we know for sure it's not just policymakers, it's not just the industries that are in the auto sector, but also large groups like the Serum Institute are backing up, either in individual capacity or whichever capacity it is, backing up such initiatives, and that's very, very encouraging. That's very, very inspiring for rest of us as well, to look at investments into such startups towards the clean energy and clean mobility. Many people also checked and asked me when we told them about a fireside chat with you, has the Poonawalla group, has the Serum Institute started a large EV company or any of those companies, and is there such an announcement? I said there is no such thing that's happening there. However, as a large group, the responsibilities, the kind of work that's done beyond your business, what do you think are the takeaways for the others as individuals or as corporates, that even if you're not in the auto sector, even if you're not in the EV sector, that you can work on, that you can take forward?
So, I mean, from a professional or an individual, I would encourage innovate as much as you can, because there is so much investment that can be made in innovation. And there are funds, there are corporates, there are others who would back you if you have a viable technology or a solution in this space. You've looked at, if you look globally also, there's a lot of opportunity out there to back startups and investors if you have a viable solution or a technology. But if you look at what other corporates and others can do, I think major power consumers, steel industry, so many other industries, will have to look at working with the governments in their respective states and the center to get land allocation, in a way that they can then put up these solar and wind power projects, and then use hydrogen and use electrolyzers and technology to convert that green energy into storable and usable energy at that location. Transporting it everywhere is going to be challenging. You need pipelines. That will happen eventually over the next 10 years.
You need a bit of a zone, you need a bit of a spatial zone for all of this ecosystem to build up?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea also. Some land could be given to have a cluster, like, you have a IT cluster, biotech cluster. You can have a green energy zone cluster where there's, innovators, investors, all of those people can be put together there.
Sure. So as Punekars, right, we could always make a pitch, whether we talk to center or state, or to the Pune government also, that Pune is the best place to make such a zone, as and when either center, state, or the local government thinks of putting up a zone. Because look at it this way, the biggest of the biofuel enabler, Praj Industries, is based here. On the hydrogen fuel, you just heard about the H2E. Just now we took a trial run of the KPIT bus that's also running on hydrogen fuel, very much here. And of course, the huge EV ecosystem that we have. Given all of this, hopefully Pune would also make a pitch for such a zone happening very much around us and here. Are there any other areas around the ventures that you're supporting, the clean energy drive that you're supporting, the sustainability that you're supporting that you'd like to cover before I ask the last question? Thank you. So here is the last one that I should ask. You talked about how both the policies at center and state have been enabler for you. You mentioned about the leadership of Honorable Environment Minister. Are there any areas that you think that the government, both at center, state, can look at, work on to even further speed it up, support, enable it?
I think they are going to announce an environment policy or a green energy policy. I think we should have clarity on a policy and stick to it. That's the only prayer that the private sector would want. If you look at the traditional power sector also in different states, we had invested in windmills, wind power. In Maharashtra, of course, that was fine. Andhra had some trouble. Certain other states had some trouble. So once you have PPAs, whether it's green energy for wind, solar or whatever, we have to ensure that whatever we are offering to the private sector, the funding is in place. And, the long-term funding plan from the government should be in place, including, it sends the right signal then to the investors. There are a lot of funds who are willing to partner and invest with the private sector here, but they need that certainty from the government side. So once that is there from the center, and I know we have it very much so because of the backing of our environment minister here in Maharashtra, but if you're talking on a national level, that's what would be required for other corporates also in my position to come forward and enter, because this is not our area. So for us to get into something also, you want certainty.
Thank you so much. I think that's the point about this area as well as any other area. All that businesses expect is a fair amount of certainty so that they can continue to invest, they can continue to enable the growth. As you mentioned, Maharashtra government has done some of those policy initiatives and support. Hopefully this will continue to grow and we all would continue to contribute in it. We would not take any more of your time, but thank you so much for allocating this time, sharing this with us, because you continue as an entity, as an organization, as your body of work, as well as you as an individual, to inspire all of us here in Pune and beyond. Thank you so much for your time.